There is a particular kind of motorcycle that turns up at every workshop, and mechanics recognize it immediately. It is spotless. The paint has been polished. The chain is wet with fresh lube. The service book is filled in early, every time. And the countershaft bearing is finished at 11,000 miles. That combination is not a coincidence, and it is not bad luck. Some of the most expensive damage a motorcycle takes is done by its owner, slowly, deliberately, while trying to look after it. Nobody in this video is careless. That is the whole point. Every habit here comes from wanting the machine to last. Number 7, lubricating the chain after every ride. This one feels obviously right. A chain is a moving metal part outdoors. More lubricant should mean less wear. Except that on any motorcycle built in the last 40 years, the chain does not work the way most riders picture it, an O-ring chain, or an X-ring, which is the same idea with a better seal, has grease sealed inside each link at the factory. Small rubber rings sit between the side plates and hold that grease around the pins and bushings where the actual load is. Nothing you spray on the outside gets past those rings. It is not supposed to. So the lubricant you apply is not lubricating the wear surfaces. It has two jobs. It keeps the rings themselves supple, and it stops the outer plates and rollers rusting. That is a real job. It is just a much smaller job than most people think, and it comes with a cost. Chain lube is sticky, deliberately, so it stays put at speed. Road grit sticks to it. Sand, brake dust, aluminum from the sprockets. Apply lube on top of that without cleaning, then ride, then apply again. And what builds up on the sprocket teeth is not a protective film. It is a grinding paste, held exactly where the chain meets the teeth. Manufacturers put the actual interval in the manual, and it is usually somewhere around every 400 to 600 miles, with a clean before the lube, not instead of it. The rider who lubes weekly and never cleans is not maintaining the chain. He is charging it with abrasive and running it. Number 6, keeping the chain nice and tight. A loose chain looks wrong. It slaps. It makes noise. It feels like something coming undone. So it gets adjusted until it looks taut and neat. Here is what that misses. A motorcycle chain does not run at a fixed length. The distance between the countershaft sprocket and the rear sprocket changes as the suspension moves because the swing arm pivots around a point that is not the countershaft. At one specific point in the suspension travel, that distance is at its maximum. That is the tightest the chain will ever be, and it happens under load, in a corner, over a bump, with a passenger. Not on the stand in your garage. Manufacturers specify slack measured with the bike unloaded precisely because they have already calculated what happens at that point. The number in the manual, usually somewhere between 1 and 1.5 inches of free play, is not sloppiness they tolerate. It is the margin. Take the slack out on the stand, and you have removed the margin. Now every compression of the suspension pulls directly on the countershaft. That shaft runs in a bearing inside the gearbox, behind a seal, and it was never designed to be a tension member. The failure is not dramatic. It is a weep of oil at the front sprocket that gets blamed on a bad seal. Then a whine that gets blamed on the chain. Then a gearbox that has to come apart. This is not a rare mistake. It is one of the most common ways a well-meaning owner writes a 4-figure check way. Number 5, the pressure washer. Nothing looks like care more than a clean motorcycle, and nothing removes road salt faster than a jet of water. The problem is what a pressure washer actually is. It is a device for pushing water through a small gap at high speed. Your motorcycle is a collection of small gaps with grease behind them. Wheel bearings are sealed against splash and rain. They are not sealed against a directed jet. Neither are steering head bearings, suspension linkage bearings, the swing arm pivot, or the seals on the fork legs. Push water past any of those and it does not evaporate. It sits in the grease, emulsifies it, and the bearing runs dry from that point on. Then there are the electrical connectors. Modern bikes have dozens, and they are weatherproofed, not waterproof. Water forced into a connector does not cause a fault that day. It causes corrosion on the pins and a fault 3 months later that presents as an intermittent sensor and costs a diagnostic fee to find. There is also the chain again. A jet of water aimed at an O-ring chain can lift the rings enough to force water past them, which puts the water on the inside, next to the grease you cannot replace. A bucket, a sponge, and a hose at normal pressure clean a motorcycle perfectly well. It is slower. That is the only disadvantage. Number 4, using car oil. This one usually starts as a sensible thought. Oil is oil, car oil is cheaper by volume, and the specification on the bottle looks impressive. But most motorcycles share their engine oil with the clutch and the gearbox. In a car, those are 3 separate systems with 3 separate fluids. In a motorcycle with a wet clutch, the same oil that lubricates the crankshaft is sitting between the clutch plates that have to grip each other under load. Modern car oils are formulated to reduce friction, because reduced friction is better fuel economy, and fuel economy is what car oils are sold on. Many carry friction modifiers for exactly that purpose. An oil designed to stop metal surfaces gripping each other is the last thing you want between clutch plates. The result is a clutch that slips under hard acceleration, usually in the higher gears where the load is highest. The rider often blames the clutch itself and replaces it in the same oil. There is a marking for this. Motorcycle oils suitable for a wet clutch carry a JASO rating, MA or MA2 for higher friction. Car oils that are the problem tend to carry an API mark reading energy conserving or resource conserving. It is printed in the ring on the back of the bottle. It takes 10 seconds to check, and it is the difference between an oil that works in your engine and one that will make it slip. If you find yourself interested in the version of things that comes with a reason attached, rather than the version that gets repeated at bike nights, there is a subscribe button under this video. That is the whole pitch. Number 3. Filling the oil to the top of the sight glass. A little extra oil feels like insurance. If low oil is what kills engines, then more oil should be further from that problem. Engines do not work that way. The crankshaft in a wet sump engine spins a few millimeters above the oil surface. It is meant to. If you raise that surface, the crank starts to hit it, and at 6,000 revolutions a minute, hitting oil is not gentle. It whips air into it. Aerated oil is a different substance from oil. It is compressible, it carries less heat, and the pump moves a mixture of oil and bubbles instead of a solid column of liquid. Oil pressure at the bearings drops at exactly the moment the engine is working hardest. There is a second effect. That churning costs power and makes heat, and the oil that is now hotter and full of air is also being pushed towards the crankcase breather. Some of it ends up in the air box. The sight glass has 2 marks. The upper one is not a target. It is a limit. Number 2, starting it up every few weeks over winter. This is the most sympathetic habit in the whole list because it comes from the right instinct. A machine that sits does deteriorate. Running it should keep things moving. The problem is the length of the run. When an engine burns fuel, one of the products is water vapor. In a warm engine, that water leaves as steam through the exhaust. In a cold engine, it condenses on the cylinder walls, in the exhaust, and in the crankcase, where it mixes into the oil. An engine idling in a cold garage for 5 or 10 minutes never reaches the temperature that drives that water back out. The oil warms nowhere near enough. So every one of those short runs adds water to the oil and leaves it there. Water and oil does not just dilute it. Combined with combustion byproducts, it forms acids that attack bearing surfaces, and it accelerates the formation of sludge. The exhaust gets it worse. A cold exhaust fills with condensate that has nowhere to go, and internal corrosion in silencers and headers is one of the more expensive surprises on a bike that has done low miles. The choice is not between running it and neglecting it. It is between a proper ride of 20 or 30 minutes that gets everything up to temperature and a short idle that is measurably worse than leaving the bike alone. If it cannot be ridden, the answer is fresh oil before storage, a battery tender, and leaving it switched off until spring. And number 1, idling to charge the battery. A rider comes out to a bike that turns over slowly. He starts it, lets it idle for 15 minutes to put some charge back, then shuts it off. Most motorcycle charging systems produce very little at idle. The alternator on a typical bike is a permanent magnet type whose output climbs with engine speed And at idle, the output on many machines barely covers what the machine itself is drawing: ignition, fuel pump, lights, instruments. So the meter is not going up. On a fair number of bikes, it is going down, slowly, while the owner stands there believing he is charging it. Meanwhile, the engine is doing everything from the previous item: running cold, condensing water, washing the bores. 15 minutes of idling is one of the few maintenance actions that manages to take from both the battery and the engine at the same time. A battery that will not hold charge needs a charger, and a battery that keeps going flat needs the parasitic drain found. Neither problem has ever been solved by idling. So what connects all 7 of these? Everyone comes from treating the motorcycle as something that responds to attention. More lube, more oil, tighter chain, cleaner surfaces, more running. In almost every other part of life, that instinct is correct, and more care produces a better result. A machine does not work like that. It has specifications, and the specifications have reasons behind them, and most of those reasons are not obvious from the outside. The chain slack is a suspension geometry calculation. The oil level is a windage limit. The service interval already accounts for the abrasive. The rider who follows the manual exactly and no further is not being lazy or cheap. He is doing the thing the engineers actually asked for. And the bike in the workshop with the polished paint and the ruined bearing did not get there through neglect. It got there because somebody cared and did more, and nobody told them that more was the problem.